Welcome to the next video briefing in your S2 course. We looked at the different clearances and procedures, and hopefully you now have an idea of how to structure each of them. Now when this is done, we have to expand on them. We need to go through each stage again and look into not just the structure of each thing, but now exactly how you say these things to pilots. This is known as basic phraseology. The structure of clearances can be very theoretical, but the phraseology on the other hand are actually very specific and on point. There are a couple of important documents concerning this. You'll find a lot of information in the ICAO Doc 4444, including a phraseology chapter and examples. But for this, we really need to go local. Because while ICAO Doc 4444 states general requirements for all countries, actually the governing document when you are controlling in Denmark will be the Danish ATS instructions. More specifically, the ATS instruction 14, which deals specifically in communication and phraseology. So before we dig into these phases that we looked at in the previous video, we need to go through this document because it has a lot of information that is vital for you to know by heart by the time you are finished with your pre-training. The instruction basically consists of 3 chapters: general, communication, and CBDLC communication. First and third chapters are not important. Here it is the second chapter of communication, which is the one to know. Secondly, towards the end, it has 2 appendixes, where the Appendix A consists of all the different phrases that you must use as a controller in different situations. So, talking about chapter 2 of the ATS instructions, there is a lot of interesting parts to know. I will not go through them all right now because there is quite a lot of things, but I will go through some of them now, and the rest of them will be for the advanced phraseology chapter later on in your pre-training. As said, the first and third chapter are not really relevant to your controlling at this stage, but important does it become when you look at the chapter 2 and the point 2.6, which specify the use of the word cleared, an insanely basic and important part of good phraseology discipline. Only in association with takeoff, landings, approach clearances, and ATC clearances are you allowed to use these words. Otherwise, you have to adhere to directly expressed instructions as per the point 262, with several examples highlighted below. This is where we return to this model, which you saw in the basic procedure and clearance video briefing. This is why we subcategorize the different clearances into a clearance, an instruction, and an approval. It's something we do as a teaching tool for you to know what phraseology to use as an S2 controller, because they can be each identified by what word you need to say. Clearance use the word cleared, which is only for takeoff, landing, and ATC clearance. The word is severely restricted to just these 3 occasions as an S2 controller. Otherwise, it is called an instruction, where the instruction is expressed directly and initiated by you, such as taxi, line up, contact, hold short, cross. See point 262, or in other cases, it is called an approval, which is normally a response to a pilot request. So these words are the most important one for correct phraseology, and they must be treated as such. Point number 2.7 is another important point, which is quite similar to Doc 4444.4575 about what you need to ensure the pilots are reading back to you. Mainly they need to read back everything related to an ATC clearance, everything related to a taxiing and departing or arriving on runways and taxiways, information concerning transponder code, radio frequencies, and QNH. In point 2.8 is the entire phonetic alphabet and how you should announce them, but this hopefully you already know. 2.9 will tell you how to announce numbers. Most common pitfalls will be that 9 is a niner and 4 is 4. And a decimal is actually called a decimal. At 2.10 is a long list of how you should pronounce numbers, both in English and in Danish for our Danish students. There is a lot here, but it's way too much to go through here, so look through it yourself. It is still important. 2.11 is another long list of standard words. Some of them you should already know, mainly affirm, prove, cancel, cleared, but you should really learn all of these now. Take your time to analyze each of these in instruction 14 and look up the ones that you maybe don't know or haven't heard about. Point 2.14 talks about something you were already introduced to. This is about how to shorten a call sign. A, the registration of the airplane. B, the airline call sign followed by the airplane registration. Well, that's never used in VATSIM though. Or C, the airline call sign followed by the flight number. That's quite often used. So the first two can be abbreviated, but the third one, which is by far the most common one used on VATSIM, cannot be abbreviated. Point 216.3.1 concerns with a radio check, which we've already covered in the last topic. But in general, 2.16 explains important items concerning management of radio priority, such as 2.16.6, stating that radio calls on airplanes to short final or in landing phase may only be issued if it's of the utmost priority. For the rest, while there's a lot of good information to read, all the important part is in the Appendix 1. This is based on the ICAO Doc 4444 with added content appropriate for Denmark. So now we have to go through all the stages again like we did in the previous briefing, and we go through them alongside this Appendix 1 and see what you need to say. So the ATC clearance. The pilot will call for clearance and most often will include information such as the stand or the ATIS letter. With ATIS, you should acknowledge the receipt or advise if it has changed by saying either information India correct or information Juliet now current. Then you issue the ATC clearance. Remember, an ATC clearance is a part of where you need to use the word cleared as per 121. Cleared to. You then specify destination by saying to, and then you indicate the clearance limit by saying via, and then of course you have to specify. There are a lot of options which we will expand on later, but now for simplicity, he's been cleared via the SID. So you will announce the SID and then the squawk code. FedEx 64 Charlie cleared to Copenhagen via the Abino 6 Bravo departure, squawk 7422. Cleared to Copenhagen via Abino 6 Bravo departure, squawk 7422, FedEx 64 Charlie. FedEx 64 Charlie, read back correct. Remember here, you don't say your own station. This of announcing your own station is only on initial call. Pretty simple, but don't worry, it becomes much worse when you have non-SID departures, and that's for the advanced chapter. Let's move on to the next phase. The pilot will next call for startup and pushback. Radar Tower, FedEx 64 Charlie, Stat 5, request push and start. Point 143 and point 144 denotes start and pushback phraseology. You will have to say FedEx 64 Charlie, push and start approved, and of course you have to add the QNH 1015 as we described previously. Push and start approved, QNH 1015, FedEx 64 Charlie. See, this is going under approval. It is not an instruction, but a response to a pilot request. Therefore, we use the word approved. Other approved options can be, for example, standby or pushback at no discretion. So far, so good. Moving to taxi. This is where we get into this category, the instruction. This is the most commonly used, where you need to directly express the instructions, and even more challenging, you have to avoid the use of the word cleared and the word approved. It is a very common pitfall, and especially amongst new controllers. Radar Tower, FedEx 64 Charlie, request taxi. Point 147 specify all the taxi instructions you can give. You say taxi to holding point runway 27 via taxiways Bravo, Foxtrot and Kilo, cross runway 09. Now this one is very important. Remember, crossing runway 09 is still an instruction, so it must be announced as such. Cleared or approved are not allowed to use in this case. This is why it's so important that you know your phraseology cleanly. Enunciate the instruction directly. Taxi to holding point runway 27 via taxiway Bravo, Foxtrot, Kilo, cross runway 09. It must be clear. Now, as you are approaching the runway, the instruction continue. First, as you line up an airplane, again you must directly announce line up and wait runway 27. Remember this? Remember, runway designator must be at the end of the instruction. It's only in the takeoff and landing clearance the runway designator must be ahead of the clearance. Also, here comes another super important thing. So important that you must learn it by heart from today off. the word takeoff. This is as sacred a word as cleared. Takeoff may only be associated with the actual takeoff clearance. See point 1411 at the bottom. To give a departure instruction, then you will say after departure, not after takeoff. It's a very, very restricted word. And you can actually find this information in ICAO Doc 4444 in point 7933 right there. The expression takeoff shall only be used in radio telephony when an aircraft is cleared for takeoff or when cancelling a takeoff clearance. So only when an airplane is actually cleared for takeoff will you say FedEx 48 Charlie, the wind 270 degrees at 7 knots, runway 27, cleared for takeoff. Remember, we also tell the pilot the next frequency at VATSIM, so what do you say? After takeoff, contact balloon approach, or after departure, contact balloon approach? Yes, of course, we say after departure. Takeoff is forbidden. Remember, you can put this supplementary information just about anywhere you want in this clearance. On the landing part, see point 1.416, where it says all about landing clearances. Use continue approach. If it's too early to issue a landing clearance, use runway 27 clear to land when landing, and revert to directly enunciated instructions for taxiing to the ramp. This should get you started. Your phraseology skills are going to be far from complete, and you must study this appendix and chapter 2 of instruction 14 really, really deep to learn all the appropriate phrases. But more in depth will be talked about here in the next phase. This was the most basic stuff, and it will aid you in your first observer sessions. Thanks for watching.